The time has finally come. Today we're going to kick off the Tackle and Techniques actual. Last time we went through all the plastic baits just so that there would be no confusion going forward. You'll understand that more as we go through each technique. And you can refer back to that other video. Like I said, it's just more so that there's no confusion and you guys understand what the points that I'm trying to get across. There's a lot to get through, guys, and these first couple I mentioned in the introduction that I've structured it in a certain way. So in these first couple, you'll forgive me, even though I've written the system or this program down the way that I want to do it. It might be a little stop-start until I get my flow going and we get into it, and then it'll be a lot easier. But I'm always going to have my notes on hand just to make sure that I don't miss anything. On each particular topic or bait or technique, there's a lot of things that we have to make sure that we get right first time. I don't want, as much as I want you guys to ask questions, and I really do want you to ask questions, I don't want there to be any confusion at the end of an episode. Like I said, these episodes are probably going to be a little bit longer, and that's why I've structured them in the way that I have. I think that the smart way to do it is going to be to put in the chapters, so that if there's something that you don't understand halfway through the episode, you can always go back and go, okay, that's what he said about that. So I will use my Cliff Notes for now. Let's get into it. Okay, here we go. So this week we're going to talk about the old ball and chain, the Carolina rig. And we've got our handy dandy terminal tackle box here of all the things that we might need. But before we get into how we actually tie up the Carolina rig, we're going to talk about what's required. Now, we've spoken several videos ago about the type of rod and reel that you could do anything with. And in this particular case, this is absolutely the case. So our 7-foot medium heavy rod and reel, spinning or casting, with say 15-pound fluorocarbon on the casting rod and 20-pound braid with a 15-pound leader on the spinning rod is going to be absolutely perfect for this. However, if you feel once we've finished this video that Carolina rigging is something that could be particularly effective at the venue that you fish at, the water that you fish at, here's an update, and I'll put some notes up on the screen for you guys so that you've got a reference. 7'3" medium heavy rod, casting or spinning, a 7-to-1 reel, 7-to-1, 7.6-to-1, somewhere around there, and then obviously with the spinning reel, probably a 5.5-to-1. That's about as fast as you're going to get it, unless you spend thousands or hundreds of dollars on a rocket spinning reel, which is going to be a bit faster. You don't really need it for Carolina rigging. The premise of Carolina rigging essentially is cast out, drag the sinker along the bottom with the bait up in the water column behind the sinker. Sinker bounces along, bait comes behind the sinker, fish eats the bait. It is not incredibly complicated. It's a little bit tricky when you learn to tie the rig the first couple of times, but after that, it becomes easy. So let's get into tying the rig. So let's see what we need here. We're going to need barrel sinker, swivel, couple of beads, a hook, size dependent on what bait you are going to use. In this case, this is a 3/0 Gamakatsu extra wide gap hook, and then a tricky little thing which I'll show you here. Something that I do. You don't have to do it. I'll explain the reasoning behind it. It's something from carp fishing. It is a little silicone sleeve that goes over the top of your swivel. And I'll explain to you why I think that's a good idea. All right, let's get rid of this guy. So in this particular case, I'm going to use two different types of line. It's not because you need to use two different types of line. It's because I want you, it's going to be a little bit tricky for you guys to see the difference between the line. So I'm going to use this on a casting rod. This would just be fluorocarbon leader, fluorocarbon main line. On a spinning rod, it would be the same as well, would be braid to leader. But we're just going to use this so that you can see we're going to use this line, which is just happens to be monofilament, as our main line. So what we're going to start with is the leader of the Carolina rig. Now, the leader can pretty much be any length that you want it to be, from 1 to 3 foot. What you need to remember though, guys, is the longer your leader is, and the leader is the part that goes from the swivel to the hook, the longer that leader is, the more difficult it is to cast. It's certainly easier to cast it on a spinning rod, but it is more difficult to cast. If you're fishing off the bank, remember you've got all that line behind you, catching on trees and stuff like that. And if you're fishing off a boat and you've got a friend or a family member on the boat, there's a strong chance you're going to whack them in the head with the bait the longer the leader is. So for today's exercise, we're going to make our leader 18 inches. And we're going to do it the way I do it because it's the easiest way to do it. And yes, I have the old man glasses on. So here's the deal. Swivel, Palomar knot, double the line, go through, overhand knot, over the swivel, wet the knot, and pull it tight. Palomar knot done. Trim the tag in. That's all we're going to do on the leader for now. Now we're going to the main line. So this would be the line that's going to your rod, to your reel. Barrel sinker of some kind. We'll talk about the weights a little bit later on. Beads, glass or brass, or plastic if you like. Now, this is where this little thing that I found from carp fishing comes into play. The problem with Carolina rigs, especially if you're using brass or glass sinkers and not plastic, is that the bead, that's where our main line is going to be tied onto the swivel. The bead will bash against that because of the sinker pushing against it, and when you drag it over the bottom, bash against it, and weaken the knot. So what I've found is, if you take one of these little deals, and I'll try and find the link for it, it's actually a Temu thing. It's just a little silicone thing like that. So we've got sinker, beads, then this thin end first. Now it will become more apparent why I didn't tie the hook onto the leader. We're going to do our Palomar knot again. Double the line. Through the opposite side of the swivel this time. Overhand knot. Now you take the part of the leader where your hook is going to get tied onto, so the end of your leader, and you go through like like normal with the Palomar, no different. Pull your swivel through like that, wet the knot, pull tight. Now I'm using a bigger swivel here just so that it's more visible for you guys to see it for the video. This is a number 2 swivel. You could probably go down to a number 1 or even a 0. You don't need a massive swivel, and you also, this is a ball bearing swivel. I've just used it because it's more visible. Just a normal crane or a rolling swivel will get the job done. Right, so everything is now tied together on the main line side. Wet the line, and we slide this little deal over the eye of the swivel. To use a little bit of force just to get it on there. So what you've got now, without impeding the swivel at all, you've got that little silicone deal protecting the knot, which is underneath there now. So we can allow the beads and the sinker to slide right down to the swivel, but that little guy there is protecting your knot, so it can't get cut or damaged by the sinker and the beads. Right, so we've got sinker, beads, line protector guy, I don't even know what it's called, swivel, and now we're back at the other end of the leader. Take our hook, pull through a good amount of line, overhand knot, pull it tight a little bit, wet the knot, pull it tight. And that is our entire Carolina rig. I'm going to try and get the whole thing in frame. It's a little bit tricky. So here we have it. Hook, leader, swivel, free sliding beads, and sinker. That's the whole deal for the Carolina rig. Done. Easy. On the previous video I said I would show you how to rig worms on soft plastic worms on a hook. So here we'll do it for you today as promised. So you want the tail of your worm facing up. So there you can see if I lay that out, the tail of the worm is facing up. If you look carefully on a lot of soft plastic baits, you'll see there's actually a seam running down this where the worm has been injected. So that would give you a straight line following that seam all the way down. You put your hook point into the top of the worm, 1/8 of an inch to 1/4 of an inch, push it through. And then pull that knot or the eye of the hook as far into the bait as you want to. I like to bury it completely. You don't have to do that. Then take your thumbnail and measure on the worm where that hook sits flat on the bait without it being bunched up here. Keep your thumb there, bend the worm, and just push the hook point through the center of the worm. Now you can see the point of that hook is riding along the top of the worm. It's parallel to the top of the worm. It's flat. There's no bunching in the bait's nice and straight. You then pull the worm back towards the hook eye, and you just trap the plastic underneath. And what that does is it makes it completely weedless. That is completely weedless. And then when a bass comes behind it and bites down on it, it pops the hook out, and that will hook it, hopefully through its lip when you set the hook. And that is the Carolina rig. Okay, let's talk about a couple of different baits that you could use with a Carolina rig. Guys, honestly, you can pretty much use everything on a Carolina rig. It's down to you, basically, what you want to use on it. The only consideration would be that you would have to increase or decrease your hook size depending on what bait you're using. So for example, this is a dead ringer. This is a 7-inch dead ringer. You can see here the part where the hook goes in of the body is very short. So I've used a 3/0 hook there, or a 3/0 hook there, wide gap. If you wanted to, you could use a standard worm hook, straight shank worm hook. For the same type of thing, you would probably also get away with a 3/0 there. There's a lot of different types of baits that you could use. This is an 8-inch lizard. One of my favorites is a brush hog. You could use some kind of soft jerk bait, Zoom Super Fluke. You could use anything. One of the things that we spoke about or alluded to in the previous video was the Elastec baits. The nice thing about the Elastec baits is that they float, the majority of them. So you can imagine if you had an Elastec bait, this is your sinker on the bottom here. You've got a 2-foot leader, say, and you have an Elastec bait of some sort, a Z-Man bait, say, one of those sawtail worms, or a Z2 or a Zulu on this hook here. Because it's buoyant, you will have your sinker on the bottom, and this will be floating in the water column behind the sinker as you drag it. So as that sinker's going doop, 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 as you're dragging along the bottom, and this is out behind it, this bait will be moving by itself because of the movement of the sinker when you drag. So that's a very good option, and I've caught a lot of fish doing that. So let's talk about why we would use different sizes of sinkers. Well, it's fairly straightforward, but there are a couple of anomalies. So I said to you in the previous video when we were talking about terminal tackle that for Carolina rigging, initially when you're learning how to do it, you would only need 3 weights. Be 1/4 ounce, 3/8 ounce, and a 1/2 ounce. So I would say in water less than 12 feet deep, a 1/4 ounce would do the job nicely. In water from 12 to say 17 feet, a 3/8 ounce would do the job nicely. And then anything deeper than that, 1/2 ounce is going to get it done. When you're learning to Carolina rig, I don't recommend that you learn in water deeper than 25 feet. It may be difficult for some of you that live on lakes where you don't have a lot of shallower water, but what happens with the Carolina rig, and with any rig actually, when you get the deeper in the water you get, the harder it is to feel the sinker or the bait on the bottom. So that will come with time, and the more you do it, the more you'll become proficient at it. But when you're learning to do it, try with a 1/4 ounce sinker and try with water less than 12 feet deep just to get the hang of it. I also mentioned previously that you get many different types of sinkers for Carolina rigging. You get steel sinkers, brass sinkers. This one is a tungsten sinker, and lead sinkers. This technique, when you're learning to do it, it can be quite tricky to learn the differences between bottom structure and cover. So, for example, when you become more proficient at it, you will learn when you're going along a rock bottom, it is a very sharp, jarring dink, 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 dink on the tip of your rod tip will go like that as you're dragging it. But when you drag it into weed, it's more of a slow drag, and then it pops out. And then when you drag it into timber, whereas the rock feels very hard when you're dragging along the bottom. If you drag into timber, a lay down tree or whatever that's on the bottom, you'll feel it's a lot softer feel, and that's very difficult to convey in a video. But when you do it and you feel it with the rod, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So where can we throw this Carolina rig? Let's move all this stuff out of the way, and then we'll get a map up here and we'll have a look at it. So we've got this generic map here, like we discussed that we were going to use. I'm going to try to use the same map for all the techniques that we do. We might not be able to do that, but I'm going to try. So the types of structure where you can use a Carolina rig, it is all dependent on your skill level and how long you've been doing it for before you can be comfortable throwing into the really thick stuff, really thick cover or structure that's on the bottom. What I always recommend for people that are learning to throw a Carolina rig is to try and find a gently sloping area that has got either boulders on it or gravel. And most lakes, or even clay, most lakes in the world will have one of those type of cover or structure when you're learning how to throw a Carolina rig. We'll talk about the structure now, but for example, a gently sloping area, you can see here, all the topographic lines here are very close together, so that would not be a gently sloping area. You can see here, they start to get further and further and further apart, and further apart and further apart until they are very wide apart. In fact, these ones here are probably, I would say, 5 to 10 feet apart. So a gently sloping area would be a gently sloping area here. If you look at the topographical map here, you can see, although just ignore the depth, these topographic lines or contour lines, if you like, are a long way apart. That would be a gently sloping area. And in this particular case, this is an area of shallow water sloping away gently into deep water. What that allows you to do is to either park in the shallow water and throw into the deep, bringing your bait up from the deep into the shallows, or to park in the deep water and throw it into the shallow and bring it down the slope towards the deep water. That is a very effective way to fish a Carolina rig because you are covering a lot more water. You can make longer casts and fan cast around, and if your boat was parked there and you were fan casting, means cast. What it's allowing you to do is to work a large area of water very thoroughly because you're dragging the Carolina rig back towards you. So it would be wind, drag the tip maybe 6 to 8 inches, wind up the slack, drag the tip 6 to 8 inches, rinse, repeat. And if you are fan casting this area, you can cover an entire area fairly quickly, depending on the time of year, and we'll talk about that now, with one bait. But you're covering many depths, depending which way, whether you're fishing shallow to deep or deep to shallow. You're covering the entire water column other than the surface with one cast. Here you can see that there's a creek bed. This could also indicate a road. In this particular one, it's a creek bed. This one here is a road. Casting down these roads or over the road and bringing it up the sides and down the sides is a very effective way to fish a Carolina rig because you're covering water. So you can see here that most of what I'm talking to you about now is structure. It is not cover. The problem that a Carolina rig has with having the sinker so far ahead of the bait, when the sinker drops, if you, for example, were fishing near grass and the sinker drops and falls into the grass and the bait is up here and the sinker gets stuck in the grass and you're pulling on the sinker all the time to get the sinker to come out of the grass, you're not fishing effectively because the sinker is stuck, you will probably not feel the bite on your bait. So areas like docks and things like that, if you shorten your leader up to 12 inches and fished around the docks, that would absolutely be fine. The thing that you have to worry about in that particular case, and here's these docks indicated in yellow here, is when you cast towards the dock, if your cast is not spot on and it wraps around the leg of one of the docks, or there's a wire there or a rope there holding the dock to the shore, there's a very good chance you're going to get snagged. So for simplicity's sake, we will say the smart play with a Carolina rig is to use it as an open water technique. So what do we mean by open water technique? We are talking about areas away from the bank. Now, guys, I am not discouraging you from, say, parking parallel to the bank and throwing down the bank, or throwing out into deep water and bringing it back towards the boat. I'm not trying to do that at all. What I'm saying is, for this technique to be most effective, it is probably best used in open water. So, main lake points. Here we have one here. Secondary points. Here's a secondary point here. Long flat stretches of gravel or small boulders. Areas like this here. And like this here. Gently sloping banks. Areas like this here and this here. Road beds. Ridges. Ledges out in the middle of the lake. There's plenty of areas to fish a Carolina rig. It is a little bit more tricky from the shore. However, if you are fishing from the shore and you're using a map, a topographic map of the lake, and you can find areas of harder bottom which may have gravel or small rocks on them or whatever the case might be, and you are throwing out from the bank down the sloping bank and bringing it back up the sloping bank towards you, it could be a very effective technique. Absolutely. It is trickier from the shore, but not impossible. So what type of structure or cover do we want to avoid when we're throwing a Carolina rig? They are not massively effective in thick grass. If you have got areas of scattered grass, it would be fine. You will get stuck, but you'll be able to pop it out easier. So, thick grass mats, not ideal. Lily pad fields, not ideal. Sharp, jagged rocks, not ideal. Riprap, not ideal. Anywhere where your sinker can fall into a crack or crevice or hole in your structure or cover is going to not be a good deal for you. It's not going to be a good day for you if you're throwing a Carolina rig. You're going to get stuck. You're going to break off. You're going to get frustrated. It's just the way it is. What time of year would you throw a Carolina rig? What weather would you throw a Carolina rig? What water temperature would you throw a Carolina rig? For me, a Carolina rig is an all year round bait. 12 months of the year where you don't have hard water or ice, Carolina rig's going to work. There is always going to be an opportunity to catch fish on a Carolina rig somewhere in that body of water. The nice thing about Carolina fishing is it is a very good technique when you are learning to bass fish, to learn to tell the difference between bottom composition, because the sinker will tell you what the bottom is made up of. And although that sounds very weird to say that on a video, I'm telling you, the first time you do it, you will feel it. So, what does the bite feel like? How to explain what a bite feels like on a Carolina rig? There's a couple of, in my experience, there's been a couple that have stood out in my mind when you're fishing with a Carolina rig. You usually don't fish a Carolina rig on a slack line. So with a Carolina rig, most of the time you're either winding or you're pulling it. And the speed again is up to you. In the summertime, you can fish it a little bit quicker. In the winter, I would slow it down. So it's a warm water, cold water deal. What normally happens with a Carolina rig when you get a bite is you will either be winding or you're doing your sweep or your pull like that, and you'll just feel it pull back and it'll be boom, boom, like that. And what you do is just wind down, wind any slack out of the line and just set the hook. You don't need to drive the hook home with a Carolina rig. Just a good solid hook set and start winding straight away. One of the things that you need to be aware of with the Carolina rig, because the sinker is free sliding on the rig, if the fish comes up to the surface and jumps and throws it, what can sometimes happen if you don't keep the line tight is the weight of the sinker can actually pull the hook out of the fish's mouth. It doesn't happen a lot, but it can happen. And usually when it happens, as with all things bass fishing, is when you have hooked a very big fish. So be aware of that, guys. Don't give the fish any slack in the line when you're winding it in with a Carolina rig. So that's the first type of bite. It just kind of swims away from you or pulls away from you. What I've found in the colder months when you fish a Carolina rig and you ideally want to be fishing it quite a bit slower than you would in the summer, is that you will just feel one boop, like that. It literally feels the way that sounds. And then you would wind any slack out of the line, feel it, and if you felt any weight there, same thing again, set the hook. And the final bite that I could try to explain to you with a Carolina bite, and this usually happens when the sinker is still busy sinking and the fish has come up towards the bait, grabbed the bait and turned and swum away. What happens then is, and again, you'll only need to throw the Carolina rig a couple of times to recognize what the weight feels like on the end of your line. So what will be happening is you will have cast out, the line will be sinking, and all of a sudden it'll just go weightless. And what that means is the fish has seen the bait falling towards it, has come up, grabbed the bait before the sinker has hit the bottom, turned and swum away. And what that will feel like is just, it feels like it's gone mushy. It feels like it's gone weightless in your hands. Don't wait on it. Wind up and set the hook. That fish is already swimming with your bait. Like I intimated a few minutes ago, in the wintertime, with any type of bait, not just a Carolina rig, with any type of soft plastic bait, if you live in an area where it gets fairly cold during the winter, all you want to do with your presentation is slow it down. So in the summer, you might kind of wind, sweep, because you're trying to cover a lot of water. If you're in an area in the wintertime and you know that there are fish in that area and the water temperature has got cold and you're still brave enough to go fishing, good for you. Get out there. And Carolina rig is particularly good in the wintertime. As we said, it helps you to cover a lot of water. You will just do exactly the same thing that you did in the summer, but half your speed. And you just painstakingly work that sinker over the bottom, nice and slow, and hope something's going to find it. And hope that you're going to catch a lovely big bass. Like I said, guys, there are any number of baits that you can use on a Carolina rig. So before going to the lake, like we spoke about in the first videos that we did when we started this channel, try to find out what type of food sources there are for the bass in your particular lake that you're going to fish, or your home lake, or whatever the case might be. And then adjust your baits accordingly. And as far as colors go, the advice that I have for that is that you only need a few colors to get started. My recommendation would always be some type of watermelon red, watermelon candy, Mardi Gras, one of those types of colors. Some type of green pumpkin. My particular favorite is green pumpkin blue flake. It seems to work everywhere I fish in the world. Some type of June bug or red bug color. Those baits that we showed at the beginning of the video when we were doing the rig, those are June bug. That's June bug. It's dark purple with like a green flake in it. And then finally, some type of black. Any black seems to work everywhere in the world as well. So black is a fantastic color to always have in any kind of lure that you might purchase for any type of soft plastic fishing. So if you have those colors in your boat, pretty much, or in your tackle bag when you're walking the bank, pretty much anywhere you go, there's a chance, a very good chance, you're going to be able to catch a fish on those colors of baits. Now, a lot of the time that is dependent on watercolor. Guys, I hope you can see why the early videos that we did on this channel are important. All those things that we discussed in those early bass biology playlist videos are coming back into play now. Terms that we're using, watercolor, describing how things work on the map, water temperature, that type of thing. The only time where Carolina rigging is less effective than it would normally be is in super dirty water. I'm not saying that you will not catch fish on a Carolina rig in dirty water. It is less effective than it would be in stained or clean water. The beads, if you are using a tungsten sinker and a glass bead, they will help fish to find the bait because of the sound that they make when they click against one another. Even with that little silicone deal that we put over the knot and the top of the swivel to stop the beads from smashing into the knot and separating it, it will still make a clicking sound, and that will help fish to find it. But there are far more effective ways to catch fish in dirty water than a Carolina rig. I'm not going to do it in this video, but we will do it in probably the next video. I'm going to show you a way to use dye and scent to color your bait, or just give it an accent and also give it a smell. And that will help as well in dirtier water, but that will probably be in the next video. Guys, I hope that this video has helped you to understand our first technique, which is the Carolina rig. I hope that the way we've laid this video out is going to work as far as being more understandable and more legible. And I'm going to put in the chapters and descriptions and any other information that I feel might help you when you're learning to throw a Carolina rig. So, you've seen how easy it is to tie the rig up, the old ball and chain. Get out there and give it a try, guys. Thanks for watching the video. I'll see you next time.